Hey, brothers and sisters, welcome to week 65 of Read Through the Bible in 2 years. In our Old Testament readings, we are in the middle of the book of Second Chronicles. And as I've mentioned before, the book of First and Second Chronicles is more than just a retelling of what happened in First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings. No, the book of First and Second Chronicles, those books deal with and are mostly interested in what happens with the temple. Who is it that's going to build the temple? And they make the emphasis that that was King David who did everything but build the temple himself. David left all of the architectural drawings for King Solomon to do, which isn't exactly the way that First Kings tells that story, but that's the way that First and Second Chronicles tells that story. And then their interest is of who works in the temple, who are the priests, who are the musicians, who are the ushers of the temple. And they have these long lists of people and lineages about the people who are caring for the temple. So now, as we've moved beyond the King Solomon, and we now move into that chapter of one of the kind of the ugly chapters of God's people, where the son of King Solomon, his name was Rehoboam, in his foolishness, in his stubbornness, does everything to make it so that the country breaks in part. A civil war takes place, and Israel breaks up into two different countries: the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And what where in First and Second Kings you have this telling of that story where sometimes they talk about the kings of Judah for the southern kingdom, and sometimes they talk about the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel. Well, not here, because they're really mostly concerned about what happens with Judah, and what happens with Jerusalem, and what happens with the temple in Jerusalem. And they really only mention the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel only when it applies to something happening in Jerusalem. And so you also noticeably absent in this retelling of this story is the story of the prophets Elijah and Elisha. And that's simply because Elijah and Elisha were prophets to the northern kingdom of Israel. To our knowledge, they never even went into the temple in the southern kingdom of Judah. So we do not hear anything about those stories as well. So we continue with that reading in Second Chronicles and will for the next couple of weeks. And then in our New Testament readings, we are still in the Gospel of Luke. And in these last couple of chapters, where Jesus now is hanging on the cross, and as Jesus dies and is placed into the tomb, that's how the chapter 23 of Luke ends. But chapter 24 begins with those women that go to the tomb expecting to find the dead body of Jesus there, and they find the tomb is empty, and that announcement that says, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" And they go and tell the disciples. And then you have that continuation of those stories about Jesus appearing first to those two disciples on their way to the town of Emmaus. And there they where Jesus is, they're walking towards Emmaus, and Jesus joins them on the road, but they don't recognize the resurrected Jesus. And they won't recognize him until they break bread with him at the end of their journey. And as they run back to tell everybody about it, Jesus appears then to the rest of the disciples. And then the Gospel of Luke ends with Jesus ascending into heaven, which is then retold when we begin our next book of the New Testament, the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, which begins with that retelling of the story of Jesus ascending into heaven and giving that final mandate that says, "You will be my witnesses to first everybody in Jerusalem, and then in Judea, and then Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth." So, folks, thank you. Thank you for your continuation, your persistence in reading through the Bible in 2 years. May it continue to deepen your knowledge of Scripture, but more importantly, may it continue to deepen your love for this God who speaks to us through Scripture. Thank you.